I've never liked talking about this, but people always ask me what it was like working night shifts alone. They think it's just boring or lonely, but they don't know how heavy the dark hours can get. How wrong the world feels when you're the only one awake. I was 20 when I got the job at a 24/7 diner off Highway 6. It was one of those old chrome-sided places that had been around forever, with neon lights buzzing outside and vinyl booths that stuck to your skin in the summer. Truckers and drunks kept it alive during the night, and I thought it would be an easy gig. Pour coffee, clean tables, collect tips, stay awake. Most nights were slow. I'd wipe down counters, refill the ketchup bottles, and listen to the faint hum of the jukebox. Sometimes I'd get a trucker or two who'd want eggs at 3 a.m., but otherwise it was just me, the cook, and the sound of the highway. The cook, Earl, was an older guy who mostly stayed in the back. He had a bad hip and moved slow, so half the time I felt like I was running the place alone, which was fine until things started happening. It began with the bell. We had one of those little silver bells above the front door that jingled whenever someone walked in. I was cleaning a booth one night around 2:30 a.m. when the bell rang. I looked up expecting to see a customer, but the door was shut. No one was there. I figured maybe the wind had rattled it, but then it happened again the next night. Bell jingles. Empty doorway. I asked Earl if he'd ever noticed it, and he just shrugged. "This place has always been drafty," he said, but I didn't miss the way his eyes lingered on the front for a moment too long. The next week, the weirdness escalated. I was refilling the pie case when I noticed something in the reflection of the glass. At first, I thought it was me, until I realized the figure was standing several feet behind me by the booths. Tall, thin, with a shadow that didn't seem to match the light. I spun around, heart racing. The booths were empty. When I turned back, the reflection was gone. After that, I couldn't relax. I started jumping at every sound. The jukebox would sometimes turn on by itself, blaring static before cutting off. Coffee mugs I'd set down would slide a few inches across the counter when my back was turned. The worst was the bathrooms. We had 2 single stalls at the back of the diner. I'd avoid them at night if I could, because every time I walked past, I'd hear faint whispers like someone talking inside, just low enough I couldn't make out the words. One night, I worked up the courage to yank open the men's bathroom door. Empty, but the sink was running. The faucet turned off the second I stepped inside. I stood there staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror, my chest heaving, and just as I turned to leave, I swear I saw movement behind me in the mirror, a shape in the corner of the stall, standing completely still. When I spun around, there was nothing. I told myself I was overtired, hallucinating. But then came the night I almost quit. It was dead quiet around 4 a.m. when the bell above the door jingled. I looked up from wiping the counter, and for once the door was swinging open. A man stepped inside, at least I think it was a man. He was tall, his shoulders brushing the frame of the door, and he wore a long, dark coat that looked soaked even though it hadn't rained in weeks. His head was tilted slightly, and I couldn't see his face beneath the shadow of the neon sign behind him. Hi there," I said, forcing a smile. "Sit anywhere you like." He didn't move, just stood in the doorway dripping onto the tile. The silence stretched until my skin crawled. I glanced toward the kitchen, hoping Earl would come out, but he never did. Finally, the man moved slowly, deliberately, sliding into the booth closest to the window. I grabbed a menu and walked over, trying to steady my shaking hands. "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded once. I poured him a cup, the steam curling between us. That's when I finally looked at his face, or tried to. There wasn't one. His features were blurred like bad reception on a TV screen. My eyes kept trying to focus, but slipped away as though his face refused to exist. I froze, menu still in my hand. He lifted the cup of coffee and held it in front of where his mouth should have been. I didn't see him drink, but the liquid lowered in the cup. That was enough for me. I mumbled something about getting his order and bolted to the kitchen. "Earl," I whispered, "there's someone out there." Earl was leaning against the counter, pale, staring at the swinging kitchen door. "I know," he said softly. That chilled me more than anything. When I peeked back into the dining area, the booth was empty. The coffee cup sat untouched, filled to the brim, steam still rising. I quit the next morning. I didn't wait for my paycheck. Didn't even tell Earl. I just left. To this day, I can't drive past that diner without feeling my stomach twist. The neon sign is still there, buzzing faintly against the night sky. Sometimes I think about stopping, just to see if it was all in my head. But then I remember that blurred face, and the sound of that bell, ringing when no one walked in. I know better now. Some places aren't meant to be open all night. I took the job because I was broke and desperate. Simple as that. The mall had been half dead for years, ever since the bigger shopping centers opened closer to the city. By the time I got hired, only a handful of stores were still open. An old shoe outlet, a dollar store, and a small diner near the entrance. The rest of it was shuttered. Empty storefronts with dark windows, mannequins gathering dust behind metal grates. The company that owned the place didn't want to pay for a full team of guards, so they hired 2 of us to alternate nights. My shift was midnight to 6 a.m. My job? Walk the halls every hour, check doors, and make sure no one was breaking in to squat or vandalize. It sounded easy enough. I figured I'd get paid for sitting in a chair most of the night. But the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Too quiet. When the last of the late-night customers trickled out and the diner closed at 11, the place went dead. The air inside the mall felt heavy, stale, like the building itself was holding its breath. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights couldn't cover the silence. My first night, I sat in the security office staring at the monitors. 20 cameras, most of them pointed at empty halls or dark storefronts. Watching them felt wrong, though. Every time I looked away, I felt like something was shifting, like the angles were changing. I laughed it off. Paranoia, I told myself. But then came the sounds. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps echoing from the food court. Not just faint taps, heavy, deliberate footsteps. I grabbed my flashlight and walked out, calling, "Mall security! Anyone here?" The food court was deserted. Plastic chairs stacked, soda machines unplugged. My light swept over everything, catching motes of dust swirling in the air. But the sound didn't stop. Footsteps, coming from above. I tilted my light up toward the second-floor balcony. For just a second, I saw a figure leaning over the railing, watching me. By the time I blinked, it was gone. I told myself it was a shadow. I told myself a lot of things, but the next night it happened again. This time I heard laughter. A child's laugh, high-pitched and echoing, bouncing down the halls. I froze in the middle of the concourse, flashlight trembling in my hand. "Hello?" I called. The laughter cut off instantly. I swept the light over the shuttered storefronts, but all I saw were the empty grates and mannequins staring blankly from behind dusty glass. And then one of the mannequins moved, just slightly. A twitch of the hand against the glass, I backed away, muttering, "Nope, nope, nope," until I was back in the office. When I checked the cameras, one of the monitors had static. Just one, the one pointed at that storefront. I switched it off. The third night was worse. It was close to 4 a.m., that dead hour where time feels like it stops. I was making my rounds, trying not to think about how many empty eyes were staring at me from behind display windows. As I passed the old toy store, I heard music. A faint tinkling like a music box. I froze. The store had been closed for years. Still, the music played, soft and sweet. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer. The grate was pulled down, but I crouched and peered under the dusty metal. That's when I saw it. A small wooden horse, the kind you'd find on a carousel, sitting in the middle of the floor. It was rocking slowly, forward and back, forward and back. There was no breeze, no reason for it to move. The music stopped, and the horse stopped rocking. I bolted. When I got back to the office, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My chest was heaving, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the radio. That's when I heard the knock. 3 slow knocks on the office door. I didn't answer, didn't move, didn't breathe. After what felt like forever, I checked the monitor. The camera outside the office showed the hallway empty, but the door handle was still turning, rattling like someone was testing it. I called my supervisor that morning and told him I was done. He didn't even sound surprised. Just told me to leave the uniform in the office. I didn't argue. On my way out, I passed by the food court one last time. Sunlight was starting to stream through the skylight, chasing away the shadows. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. Then I noticed something scratched into one of the tables. It wasn't there before. 3 words, carved deep into the plastic. "See you tonight." I walked faster. I've never gone back. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear that faint music box playing, and the creak of a wooden horse rocking in the dark. People laugh when I tell them cleaning offices at night was the scariest job I ever had. They think it's just vacuuming carpets and wiping down desks. But those people never spent 8 hours alone inside a 30-story building with nothing but humming lights and endless empty hallways. I was 21, broke, and the night shift paid better than day. My job was simple: clean the executive floors, empty the trash, wipe surfaces, and vacuum. The building was mostly glass, the kind that gleams in the day and turns into a black mirror at night. The first couple of nights were fine, boring even. I'd pop in my earbuds, crank some music, and try to make the hours go faster. But soon I started noticing things I couldn't explain. It began with the elevators. I'd be pushing my cart down the hall when I'd hear the ding. The doors would slide open. No one inside. The elevator would just sit there waiting. The first time I figured someone had called it from another floor, but then it started happening constantly. Every night around 2 a.m., that elevator would open on its own. I tried ignoring it. But one night I stepped closer and realized the panel inside was dark. No buttons lit, no floor selected. It shouldn't have been moving at all. Then came the glass. The building had huge windows overlooking the city. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in the dark glass as I cleaned. But one night, I noticed something wrong. I was standing in the break room, wiping down the counter when I glanced at the window. My reflection was there, but it wasn't moving the way I was. I froze. In the glass, my reflection was still wiping the counter, long after I'd stopped. Its movements were slower, exaggerated, like it was mocking me. I backed out of the room without turning my back on it. After that, I stopped looking at the windows. But the worst part was the 30th floor. That was the executive floor. Long hallways, fancy carpet, corner offices. My supervisor told me it had been remodeled after a fire years ago. Nobody worked up there anymore, but I was still supposed to clean it once a week. The first time I went up, the air felt different. Stale, heavy, like the whole floor had been sealed off too long. I was vacuuming one of the offices when I heard typing, the faint click-clack of a keyboard. I shut off the vacuum and listened. It was coming from the corner office at the end of the hall. The door was half open. Light spilled out into the hall. I should have left. I know that now. But I pushed the door open. The office was empty. But the computer on the desk was on, the screen glowing. Words filled the document on the screen, line after line. Get out, get out, get out, get out. I stumbled back, heart slamming in my chest. The monitor flickered and went dark. I left the vacuum behind and bolted for the stairs. After that night, I begged my supervisor not to assign me to the 30th floor again. He just shrugged. "You're not the first to complain," he said. That didn't make me feel any better. The final straw came a week later. I was on the 28th floor, emptying trash cans when the power went out. The entire building plunged into darkness. My flashlight barely cut through the black, the beam shaking in my trembling hand. That's when I heard it, the elevator ding. But it wasn't the normal ding. It was distorted, drawn out, like the sound was underwater. The doors slid open at the end of the hall, and something stepped out. Tall, thin, wrong. Its arms were too long, its head tilted unnaturally. I froze, light trembling in my hand. It moved slowly, deliberately, scraping its fingers along the wall as it walked toward me. I bolted down the stairwell, slamming doors behind me, racing floor after floor until my legs gave out. By the time I made it to the lobby, the lights were back on. Everything looked normal, but I wasn't going back. I quit that night, left the cart, the keys, everything. Sometimes, though, when I pass by the building, I swear I see movement in those black windows. A tall shape, watching, waiting.